The village of Amanku was a land of contrast. It was a place where riches and poverty coexisted in an uneasy balance, creating a tension that had been growing for years. At the heart of this contrast were three men: Motsi Okafor, Chief Amambu, and Elder Jemba. These three were the wealthiest men in the entire community, their vast riches surpassing even what the king himself possessed. While the rest of the villagers struggled to make ends meet, these men lived in grand mansions, ate the finest meals, and sent their children to study in distant cities. Yet, despite their immense wealth, they did not ignore the poor, as they were known for their generosity. They often distributed food, clothes, and money to the poor, helping as much as they could. However, no matter how much they gave, the villagers remained dissatisfied. The people of Amanku believed that their poverty was not natural. They whispered among themselves, speaking in hushed voices about the three wealthy men. "How can only three men be so rich, while the rest of us suffer?" they murmured. "They must have truly used our destinies to become wealthy, as Okowa cannot mislead us and whatever he sees spiritually is true." One fateful evening, the village square was filled with angry murmurs. The people had had enough. Men and women, young and old, gathered in large numbers, their voices rising in agitation. "We must take back what is rightfully ours," shouted Utoko, a fiery young man who had become the face of their struggle. "They have stolen from us. We cannot let them continue enjoying riches while we suffer." The crowd erupted in agreement. They resolved to take their complaints to the king, demanding justice. At dawn, a delegation of villagers marched to the king's palace. The air was tense, as they stood before King Okoka, an elderly but wise ruler who had led the people for over 30 years. He observed their angry faces before speaking. "What brings you here in such anger?" the king asked. Utoko stepped forward, his voice firm. "Your Majesty, we have come to demand justice. We want Motsi Okafor, Chief Amambu, and Elder Jemba to be killed." Gasps filled the hall. Even the king's guards shifted uneasily. The king's eyes darkened. "Kill them? And why would you ask for such a thing? They have used our destinies to acquire their wealth," another villager yelled. "That is why the rest of us are poor while they live in luxury." King Okoka took a deep breath. He knew his people were desperate, but their solution was not only dangerous but foolish. "And if they are dead, would that make you wealthy?" he asked, his voice calm yet piercing. "From who and where did you people get this type of misleading information?" The king further inquired. "Did any of them take your farms from you or stopped you from trading in the village market?" the king further pressed. The villagers exchanged glances. They had not thought about that. They saw reason momentarily in the questions the king threw at them, but they had already made up their mind on their agitation based on their strange spiritual persuasion. The revolt was dangerously written over them, and what remained was a spark and mayhem would ensue. After dismissing the villagers, the king immediately summoned his cabinet for a private meeting. The situation was dire. If he ignored the people's demands, they might take matters into their own hands. If he allowed them to kill the wealthy men, it would set a dangerous precedent. The chief advisor, Elder Yugo, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the people are restless. If we do nothing, they might start a riot." "Then what do you suggest?" the king asked. Another elder, Chief Maduka, leaned forward. "What if we ask the wealthy men to share their wealth equally among the villagers? That way, everyone will have something, and the anger will subside." The king pondered for a moment. It was a difficult decision, but it seemed to be the only way to prevent bloodshed. The king also considered and realized that even his guards and the village guards combined cannot quell their agitation. He called for Motsi Okafor, Chief Amambu, and Elder Jemba. The three men arrived at the palace later that evening. They listened as the king explained the villagers' strange demands and the solution the cabinet had arrived at. There was a long silence. Fear and surprise overwhelmed them. Motsi Okafor mustered courage and spoke. "Your Majesty, we have worked hard for our wealth," he said. "But if this is what will bring peace, we will do as you and the cabinet suggested." The others nodded in agreement. The next day, a great redistribution took place. The three men divided their wealth among the villagers, giving each family land, money, and resources to start a business. There was great jubilation in Amanko. The villagers danced and sang, celebrating their newfound wealth. For the first time, they felt equal to the men they once envied. With wealth now in their hands, the villagers felt like kings. But instead of investing wisely, they began living recklessly. Elder Okudo, who barely ate once a day, now ate 5 times. They feasted from dawn to dusk, throwing away excess food as though it had no value. Huge pots of soup and pounded yam were left to spoil under the sun. Obota, a beneficiary of the redistribution, intoxicated by his new status, took more wives. "Why should Chief Amambu have 3 wives and I only 1?" he asked as he paid the bride price for 2 young maidens in a single day. Others followed suit, marrying wives they could not care for, believing that wealth would flow forever. In another family, Elder Odiyu, who was one of the frontline agitators, after receiving his own share of wealth from the rich men, quickly demolished his more thatched house and erected a brick house. He also stopped his palm wine tapping business, only to sit in front of the new building each morning receiving greetings from passers-by and spending what remained of the money. Utoko, in a bid to mimic the wealthy men, hired servants to do even the simplest tasks. "Fetch me water." He barked at his new workers. "Sweep my compound. Cook my food." They paraded the village in fine clothes, boasting of their newfound riches, beaming from ear to ear. Those who once shared warm friendships now looked down on one another. Jealousy crept in. Fights broke out over land, money, and women. Meanwhile, the 3 wealthy men, despite giving up their wealth, did not change their lifestyle. They continued working, making careful plans and reinvesting the little they had left. Months passed, and the wealth of the villagers began to dwindle. Their lavish feast had drained their food supplies. Their unnecessary spending had emptied their purses. One day Utoko berated innocent servants he newly engaged. "What are you lazy servants doing in this house, only to eat and reduce my resources? Tomorrow morning all of you should leave my house." One by one, the servants were dismissed as their masters could no longer pay them. In Agaba's compound, there has not been peace ever since he married a new wife. Initially it appeared as though his wives were happy, but subsequently chaos became the order of the day. The resources to take care of them had been depleted and the whole family became a battleground. The other men who had also taken extra wives soon realized they could not feed them. Fights erupted in homes. Women left their husbands, and children went hungry. The very same people who once mocked hard work, claiming their destiny was used by the village rich men, had now benefited from the same men and from the alleged cursed money and had now suddenly found themselves in desperation after taking back their destiny. At the same time, Motsi Okafor, Chief Amambu, and Elder Jemba were slowly regaining their wealth. They had invested in farming, trade, and business. While the villagers wasted their fortune, the 3 men multiplied theirs. By the end of the year, the villagers were poorer than before, while the 3 wealthy men had grown even richer. One day, a group of villagers gathered in the square, looking lost and defeated. How did this happen? Utoko muttered. We had wealth in our hands. Where did it all go? An old man, one of the few who had not squandered his share, shook his head. The problem was never the wealthy men. It was our own mindset and the useless spiritual inquiry and consultations we made. They knew how to create wealth, but we only knew how to spend it. The realization was bitter. The villagers had been given the chance to change their lives, but they had wasted it. Now, they had to start again from nothing. Shame did not allow them to apologize to the three rich men or to the king, but they chose to avoid them whenever their paths crossed. King Okoko watched from his palace window as the villagers returned to their old struggles. He sighed deeply, knowing that no amount of redistribution could change the fate of those who did not understand the principles of wealth. That day, a new proverb was born in Amanku: a fool and his fortune are soon parted, but wisdom creates wealth that never fades. This story from Motherland Tales teaches a lesson that good planning, good investment, and work pays. Please subscribe, like, share and comment to our channel, so that whenever we post a new video, you will be the first to be notified. Please share with us what you have learnt via the comment section. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.